Hello there and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. Tonight we drift into the deepest quiet places on Earth, into long corridors of stone where time moves slowly and the air itself feels ancient. Canyons are not sudden creations, they are the soft result of patience. Water moving one grain at a time, wind brushing stone again and again, gravity pulling gently for millions of years. In these immense spaces, nothing is rushed and nothing is forced. Everything becomes what it needs to be through steady persistence. Before we begin, allow your body to rest more deeply into stillness. Let your breath slow without effort. Let the weight of the day loosen its grip. Imagine the cool shade of towering rock walls. Imagine the sound of distant water echoing softly through empty space. The mind recognizes this kind of quiet. It feels safe, it feels wide, it feels calm. Tonight we will journey through these slow-carved landscapes. We will explore how canyons form, how they shape climates, how they shelter life, how they hold the memory of rivers that once flowed stronger than they do today. If this gentle exploration brings you peace, I invite you to like and subscribe so you can return whenever your mind needs stillness. But for now, let the world soften around you and allow the canyon to open slowly in your imagination. Let's begin. Canyons are shaped by water that moves far more gently than we imagine. Even the deepest canyons on Earth were not carved by violent floods alone, but by quiet rivers that flowed day after day for millions of years. Each drop of water removed only a tiny grain of stone at a time. Over vast stretches of time, those tiny movements added up to towering walls and endless corridors of rock. This slow erosion teaches us that great change does not need force, it only needs patience. Inside a canyon, the temperature often feels calmer than the world above. During the day, the rock walls absorb warmth and release it slowly. At night, they return that warmth back into the air. This creates a gentle balance that softens extreme heat and cold. The canyon becomes a place where the environment steadies itself. Life that lives there grows in rhythm with this quiet stability. Sound behaves differently in canyons. A single drop of water can travel far as it echoes gently along curved stone. Each sound slows as it fades. Birds call from distant ledges, and their voices soften as they drift through space. Even silence feels deeper inside a canyon. The stillness stretches farther than it does in open land. The walls reflect both sound and quiet back into the air, creating a space where the mind settles naturally. Many canyons hide rivers that no longer roar but simply flow. These rivers move slowly between shadowed walls. Their surfaces reflect small bands of light that shift as the sun moves overhead. The water often appears calm and dark. It carries memory in its movement. It once carved the stone with stronger force. Now it simply continues its journey in peace. Canyons create their own small climates. Moist air becomes trapped along the canyon floor. Mist gathers in the early morning. Ferns and moss grow where no forest should exist. Small pockets of green life thrive quietly in places that seem made of only rock. These hidden ecosystems breathe softly out of stone and shade. At night, canyons release heat slowly into the sky. This creates gentle air currents that rise upward along the walls. Warm air lifts while cooler air drifts downward. This movement is so slow that it feels almost still. It is the canyon breathing in its own long rhythm of exchange between earth and sky. Many canyon walls display layers that look like quiet bands of color. Each layer represents a time when the environment changed. Some layers were formed when seas covered the land. Others were shaped when deserts stretched across the surface. These bands become a visual memory of Earth itself, stacked quietly one upon another in silence. Animals that live in canyons often move with patience. Mountain goats step carefully along impossible ledges. Small mammals shelter in shaded crevices. Birds glide using slow currents of rising air. Life here learns to slow down because speed offers no advantage. Every movement must be thoughtful. Every step finds stillness before motion. Canyons often appear lifeless at first glance, yet they hold more life than the open land around them. Insects hide beneath stone, reptiles warm slowly on sunlit rock, plants push roots deep into narrow cracks to find quiet water below. Life does not fight here, it adapts gently. Canyons continue to change even when nothing seems to happen. Tiny shifts in temperature create small fractures. Grains loosen, dust settles. Wind carries whispers of sand along the walls. Over centuries the shape adjusts without sound. The canyon grows not through action but through continuous rest. Canyons often guide rivers into long, winding paths that encourage the water to slow down rather than rush forward. As the river bends gently along the curves of the rock walls, its speed decreases and its surface becomes smooth and reflective. Sunlight drapes itself across the water in thin ribbons that shimmer and fade as clouds pass overhead. This slowing of the river allows sediments to settle quietly along the bottom, where tiny plants and insects begin to grow. Over time, these calm stretches become quiet sanctuaries for life, places where water feels less like force and more like rest made visible. Some canyon walls grow warmer during the day and release that warmth slowly throughout the night, creating a steady temperature that feels comforting rather than extreme. This slow exchange of heat turns the canyon into a natural thermal blanket. Cold air does not rush in suddenly, and warmth does not leave quickly. Instead, the temperature changes gradually, giving both plants and animals a gentle sense of continuity. In this steady environment, the body relaxes more easily, as if the air itself is designed to invite rest. In many canyons, wind does not move in straight lines, but flows in soft spirals that follow the curves of the rock. These currents rise and fall without urgency, brushing past ledges and slipping through narrow passages with whisper-like movement. As the wind touches the stone, it carries faint mineral scents and cool moisture that softens the air. This slow movement of wind creates a natural lullaby that continues even when everything else is silent. Canyons often shelter plants that cannot survive anywhere else. These plants grow in shaded cracks where sunlight arrives only in brief moments each day. Their roots stretch deep into the stone to reach quiet water that rests unseen below. Because sunlight is limited, these plants grow slowly and steadily, forming thick leaves that hold moisture and reflect soft light. Their presence brings a gentle softness to the hard stone, a reminder that even the most solid places allow tenderness within them. Over thousands of years, canyon rivers polish the stone until it becomes smooth like glass. The rough edges slowly dissolve into rounded curves that feel calm to the touch. When rainwater flows across these polished surfaces, it does not crash but glides gently, leaving behind faint traces of movement that vanish without sound. This continuous smoothing shows how even the hardest surfaces eventually learn the shape of peace. Many canyon pools remain untouched for long periods of time. Water gathers in natural stone basins and rests there quietly, sometimes for entire seasons. The surface becomes so still that it reflects every detail with perfect clarity. Clouds drift across it, birds pass above it, light shifts slowly across it. These pools become deep mirrors of the sky, inviting the mind to drift just as softly as the reflections themselves. In narrow canyon passages, light often appears only for a short time each day. When the sun passes overhead, a soft band of gold touches the floor briefly before slipping away again. This fleeting moment of light feels sacred in its quiet simplicity. The stone warms gently under its touch, then cools again as shadow returns. This slow cycle teaches the canyon to exist comfortably in both brightness and shade. Some canyon floors are made of sand that has been ground so fine by water and wind that it feels almost like silk beneath the foot. Each grain once belonged to solid stone. Over time, it was softened by movement until it became something entirely new. When the wind moves across this sand, It creates faint ripples that appear and disappear without sound. The land reshapes itself gently with each breath of air. Canyons often preserve ancient footprints in hardened mud that once rested beside rivers. These impressions remain silent beneath layers of stone for thousands of years. When they are uncovered, they reveal where creatures once walked slowly beneath skies long gone. These preserved steps feel like echoes of movement that never fully faded. They remind us that life has always passed through these quiet corridors with the same unhurried rhythm we feel today. At dusk, canyon walls often glow with warm tones that shift from gold to amber to deep violet. The stone seems to breathe colour as the sun lowers. Shadows stretch and soften. The air cools gently. This slow changing of light does not rush the evening. It invites it to arrive with patience. The fading colours become a slow visual meditation that guides the eyes and mind toward rest. Even when no river remains, its shape still exists within the canyon. Smooth curves and winding grooves mark where water once passed. These empty pathways become quiet records of movement that no longer needs to repeat itself. The stone remembers the water. The silence holds the memory. The canyon rests in the form that flow once gave it. In the quiet depths of many canyons, moisture lingers in the air long after rainfall has ended. Water seeps slowly from invisible cracks in the rock and gathers as faint trickles along the walls. These tiny movements never rush and never demand attention. They simply continue, drop after drop, hour after hour, feeding mosses and small plants that cling softly to shaded stone. This gentle presence of water creates a feeling of quiet nourishment, as if the canyon itself is being slowly cared for by invisible hands. Some canyon walls stretch so high that sunlight rarely touches their lower floors. These deep shadowed spaces remain cool and calm throughout the day. The air feels heavier and stiller there, as though time itself has slowed. Sound fades more quickly in these shaded corridors, and movement becomes naturally softer. Life adapts this constant twilight by growing slowly and conserving energy. In these places, even the smallest motion feels deliberate and peaceful. When rain finally arrives in arid canyon lands, the first drops awaken long dormant scents held inside the stone. The smell of wet mineral rises gently into the air. Dust settles, heat softens. The canyon responds not with chaos, but with quiet acceptance. Water travels along paths shaped over countless ages, guided smoothly through grooves and curves that were prepared long before the storm ever arrived. Along many canyon ledges, layers of stone form natural terraces that hold soil and moisture. Over time, these narrow shelves support small gardens of grasses, flowers and shrubs. Their roots anchor gently into the rock and spread slowly without force. In the early morning, dew rests on their leaves like soft glass. These hanging gardens seem to float above empty space, quiet islands of life suspended in the still air. Canyons often transform sunlight into long ribbons of moving brightness that slide slowly across the walls as the day passes. These shifting bands of light are never sudden. They glide downward inch by inch, hour by hour, until they fade into shadow again. Watching this movement feels like watching time itself drifting across stone. Nothing hurries, nothing resists. Everything follows the slow rhythm of the turning earth. Deep within some canyons, ancient riverbeds lie dry and silent beneath layers of smooth stone. These empty channels once carried strong currents. Now they exist only as gentle curves pressed into the land. Wind moves softly across them, tracing the shape of water that no longer flows. These dry paths feel like memories held in physical form, reminders that motion and stillness often trade places over vast spans of time. Canyon air often feels heavier with calm because it moves so gently between narrow walls. Air pressure changes slowly, gusts soften. Even storms arrive with a muted voice once they descend into the deeper passages. Thunder loses its sharpness. Rain lands quietly. The canyon absorbs sound and energy alike, turning the outside world into something distant and subdued. At night, canyon temperatures drop in a smooth and steady way. Stone releases stored warmth slowly into the cool air. This gradual exchange prevents sudden chills. The environment settles into a balanced quiet that remains stable until dawn. Animals move cautiously. Insects hum softly. The land rests without disturbance. Even the cold feels gentle here. Some canyon rivers disappear beneath the surface and re-emerge miles later, guided through underground passages carved patiently by flowing water. These hidden rivers travel in darkness where no light reaches and no sound echoes. The movement is steady and uninterrupted. When they rise again into daylight, they appear calm and unchanged, as though they never hurried through the depths at all. Canyon rock often contains tiny crystals that catch light in soft glimmers when the sun meets them at the right angle. These faint sparkles appear briefly and vanish again as the light shifts. The stone never holds on to brilliance, it allows it to pass gently through. This quiet interaction between light and mineral feels like a reminder that beauty does not need to announce itself to be seen. In the most undisturbed canyons, silence becomes layered rather than empty. There is the silence of stone, the silence of distant water, the silence of air sliding between walls. Each quiet layer settles on the next until the mind itself begins to soften. In such places, thought slows naturally. The body breathes more deeply without trying. The canyon offers no instructions, it simply allows rest to happen. Canyon walls often carry the subtle imprint of ancient waves that once moved across the land, when these places were covered by seas long forgotten. The patterns remain pressed into the rock like soft ripples frozen in time. Each curve tells a quiet story of water that once drifted here under open skies that no longer exist. When sunlight touches these ancient wave marks, the stone seems to remember its earlier life as ocean floor. This slow transformation from sea to canyon unfolds over distances so vast that time itself begins to feel soft and unimportant. Many canyons act as natural shelters from powerful winds. Storms may rush across the plains above, but when the air sinks into the canyon, it slows and settles. Gusts soften into gentle currents. The roar of wind becomes a quiet murmur that brushes the rock rather than striking it. This calming effect allows delicate plants and small animals to exist safely in places that might otherwise be too harsh. The canyon becomes a place where even the strongest forces learn to move gently. Some canyon shadows remain untouched by direct sunlight for most of the year. These shaded walls hold coolness like a pocket of steady night preserved within the day. The rock stays damp and dark. Moss spreads slowly across the surface. Tiny droplets of water condense and fall without sound. These shadowed spaces feel timeless, as though day and night have lost their meaning there. The air grows quiet and heavy with stillness, inviting the mind to drift more deeply into rest. As rivers move through canyons, they carry fine particles of stone that polish everything they touch. Over centuries, even sharp corners become soft and rounded. The river never forces the stone to change, it simply remains present again and again until the stone slowly learns a new shape. This quiet reshaping becomes a gentle lesson in how persistence can work without struggle, and how movement can transform the hardest surfaces into smoothness. Canyons often gather sound and release it slowly. A distant call may echo several times before fading completely. Each echo feels softer than the one before. The walls respond to sound without amplifying it into harshness. They reflect with restraint. This makes every sound feel wrapped in calm. Even a falling pebble seems to land gently in the air before touching the ground. In some canyons, natural stone arches form where water has patiently removed softer layers beneath harder rock. These arches stand quietly above empty space, shaped entirely by time. Wind passes through them, light filters beneath them, shadows drift across their curves. They stand not as monuments of force but as quiet evidence that even stone learns to let go. During early morning in a canyon, temperature layers form slowly between the cool floor and the warmer upper walls. As sunlight begins to reach higher ledges, warmth drifts downward in invisible waves. The air gently circulates as cool and warm currents exchange places. This gradual movement creates a feeling of slow awakening rather than sudden change. The canyon rises into the day without urgency. In the quietest canyons, dust settles so slowly that it feels suspended in the air. Particles drift gently downward through shafts of light. Each granule follows its own unhurried path. The movement is barely noticeable, yet it continues without interruption. Watching dust fall inside a canyon feels like watching time itself descend with infinite patience. Some canyon streams carry water that has travelled through underground stone for years before emerging into daylight. This water arrives cool and clear, carrying the memory of darkness and pressure. When it finally reaches open air, it flows calmly as if it has already known stillness for a long time. These hidden journeys give canyon waters a deep quiet that can be felt even without being seen. At dusk, animals inside canyons begin to move with gentle caution. No sudden bursts of motion, no loud crossings. Everything shifts into a softer rhythm guided by fading light. Wings move slowly. Footsteps become careful. Even predators seem to hunt with less urgency. The world adopts a quieter pace as the canyon transitions into night. Canyons do not forget the rivers that shaped them. Even after water levels fall, the stone holds the memory of flow within every curve and bend. The land remembers how to move even when it is resting. This quiet memory remains present in the form itself, creating a sense that motion and stillness are simply two expressions of the same long rhythm. In many canyons, the stone itself carries faint traces of minerals that were once dissolved in ancient waters. These minerals slowly crystallize within the rock over countless years. When light reaches them at the right angle, they create soft, quiet glimmers hidden within the walls. These tiny reflections appear briefly and then disappear again as the light shifts. They do not announce themselves. They exist quietly within the stone, like hidden stars resting inside the earth. Canyon rivers often change their paths so gradually that the movement cannot be seen in a single lifetime. A river that once flowed close to one wall may drift slowly toward the opposite side over thousands of years. The water never rushes its decision. It follows the smallest weaknesses in the stone and soil. This slow wandering teaches that even the most powerful forces can move with great patience when time is allowed to stretch wide. The deeper parts of some canyons remain sheltered from the outside world so completely that the air inside feels older and heavier. Scents linger longer. Coolness remains steady. The atmosphere feels untouched by sudden change. These hidden spaces become natural chambers of stillness where even sound hesitates before entering. The body notices this calm without needing to understand it. The breath deepens naturally. The mind softens without instruction. In certain canyons, layers of fog drift slowly along the floor in the early hours of morning. These soft clouds move like silent rivers of air, curling gently around stones and low plants. As sunlight slowly reaches them from above, the fog thins and lifts almost unnoticed. The canyon seems to awaken beneath a moving veil. This transition from night to day happens without urgency, allowing the world to arrive slowly into awareness. Some canyon floors are covered in stones that have been worn smooth by centuries of water movement. These stones no longer carry sharp edges. They sit against one another in quiet contact. When a breeze moves across them, they may shift slightly and produce a faint, muted sound that fades almost immediately. These natural tones are so soft that they feel more like vibrations than sound. They become part of the canyon's quiet language. Canyons often store heat deep within their stone during the long daylight hours. As night arrives, that warmth rises slowly back into the air. This gentle release keeps the environment from becoming suddenly cold. The temperature drifts downward with patience rather than shock. This steady transition allows animals and plants to remain at ease as the day fades into night. The canyon does not rush its rest. Some canyon plants bloom only once the sun has dropped behind the cliffs. Their flowers open quietly in dusk light. They release soft scents into the cooling air. These fragrances travel slowly through narrow passages, unfolding the night with invisible threads of perfume. Night insects follow these gentle trails without hurry. The canyon becomes a slow-moving garden shaped by darkness rather than light. In many canyon systems, underground water continues to flow even when the surface appears completely dry. This hidden movement carries moisture deep beneath the rock where roots quietly reach down to drink. Entire ecosystems survive from unseen streams that never reveal themselves to the sky. The land remains alive through this quiet circulation. Life persists not through abundance but through steady, invisible support. Some canyon echoes take several seconds to fade completely. A sound may travel along the walls, bounce between curves and soften with each return. By the time it disappears, it feels as though the canyon itself has gently breathed the sound away. This slow release of sound creates a sense that nothing ever truly stops suddenly. Everything fades with kindness here. As night deepens within a canyon, the stars begin to appear in narrow ribbons of sky above. The walls frame the heavens like tall gates of stone. Only a handful of stars may be visible at a time, but they shine with unusual clarity through the still air. Their light falls quietly into the depths and rests there without disturbance. The canyon becomes a bridge between earth and sky. Canyons often feel timeless because they change so slowly that movement becomes almost imperceptible. A falling pebble may be the only visible sign of motion for days. Wind may be the only visitor that passes through. This slowness invites the mind to slow as well. Thought follows the pace of stone. Breath follows the rhythm of shadows. The world becomes gentle simply by existing within such unhurried space. Some canyons hold pools of water so still that the surface becomes indistinguishable from glass. These quiet basins form where rivers slow into natural curves and the walls rise just high enough to protect the water from wind. Leaves drift into these pools and remain suspended without movement. Reflections of sky and stone merge into a single soft image that barely trembles. Over time, silt settles gently to the bottom, turning the water darker and deeper in colour. These pools become quiet resting places where the canyon seems to pause its long journey of change and simply remain. In the late afternoon, canyon sunlight often stretches into long horizontal beams that drift slowly across the walls as the sun lowers. These light bands move so gradually that their passage can barely be detected. Shadows lengthen, colours deepen. Warm gold turns into soft copper, then slowly into cool violet. This daily transition feels less like a sunset and more like a slow closing of the eyes of the land itself, preparing the canyon for rest. Some canyon stones ring faintly when touched by falling pebbles or dripping water. The sound is not sharp or metallic but deep and soft, like a distant chime wrapped in earth. Each drop of water that falls into a hidden crack creates a note that echoes lightly and then fades. These subtle sounds become part of the canyon's quiet music, playing continuously yet never demanding attention. In wide canyon passages, air settles into slow circular currents that move almost invisibly along the stone. These gentle rotations help distribute warmth and moisture evenly across the walls. Where the air lingers, moss grows thick and soft. Where it drifts onward, stone remains dry and smooth. The canyon breathes in subtle spirals that shape its living surfaces without noise or force. Some canyons hold ancient river terraces high along their walls. these flat ledges once marked where rivers flowed long ago. As waters slowly cut deeper into the land, the old riverbeds were left hanging above the valley floor. Today these terraces rest in quiet stillness high above the present river. They carry the memory of water without carrying water itself, like chapters preserved in stone. In narrow canyon corridors, footsteps soften as sound disperses quickly into the rock. Even deliberate movement becomes quiet within a few steps. The walls absorb vibration and return only a faint echo. This natural sound-dampening effect gives the canyon a cloaked stillness. It feels as though the world outside has been gently wrapped in distance. Some canyon streams flow beneath stone arches that were shaped over centuries by delicate erosion. These arches stand in quiet balance between what has been removed and what has remained. Beneath them, water glides without urgency. Wind passes through without resistance. The arch itself holds no tension. It exists comfortably between openness and shelter. At certain times of year, fine mist rises from canyon floors as warm air meets cool stone. The vapor lifts slowly and drifts upward in faint threads. As it meets sunlight, it becomes visible only for a moment before dissolving. These quiet veils of mist make the canyon feel layered and dreamlike, as though the stone itself is exhaling. Canyons often gather silence in a way that flatland cannot. Sound travels upward and disperses rather than spreading outward. This creates a pocket of calm where noise fades more quickly than expected. Even distant thunder feels softened by the time it reaches the canyon floor. The land seems to protect its own quiet. Some canyon walls contain tiny cave hollows where air slowly circulates with the temperature of the stone. These pockets remain cool during the day and warm at night. Insects and small animals use these shelters as resting chambers. Within them, time feels suspended, movement slow, breathing softens. The rock becomes both roof and blanket. As centuries pass, canyons gradually widen and deepen together. This change happens so slowly that the land never appears to struggle. It simply shifts in response to gravity and water. Each year adds a movement too small to notice. Yet, over long stretches of time, these small changes become entire landscapes. The canyon teaches that transformation does not need intensity, it only needs quiet consistency. Some canyons hold ancient sediment beds that were once carried by long-vanished rivers and seas. These sediments settled in gentle layers, each one resting quietly upon the last-like pages in a book written by water and time. Over ages, pressure turned these layers into stone without disturbance. Now they remain stacked in soft colour bands along the canyon walls, each layer marking a season of the earth that passed without memory, yet never truly vanished. When light touches these layers, the canyon seems to reveal its own slow-breathing history, one calm chapter at a time. In certain canyon regions, small springs emerge directly from the rock face where underground water finally finds a path to the surface. These springs do not rush. They seep gently, forming quiet trickles that slip down the stone in thin silver threads. The water feels cool and steady to the touch, as if carrying the calm of the deep earth within it. Moss and tiny flowers gather around these hidden sources, creating peaceful pockets of softness within the vast stone surroundings. Some canyon pathways curve so gently that the eye cannot see their full length at once. Each bend hides what comes next, inviting movement without demanding it. As one rounded turn opens into another, the sense of distance fades. The canyon becomes a sequence of quiet revelations rather than a destination. This slow unfolding softens anticipation and keeps the mind anchored gently in the present moment. In wide canyon basins, the wind sometimes settles completely, leaving the air suspended in a deep stillness. Leaves remain motionless. Water surfaces become perfectly smooth. Even dust seems to pause in its descent. This silence feels heavier than ordinary quiet. It wraps the senses gently and invites the heart to slow without effort. In these moments, the canyon feels like a space outside of time. Some canyon cliffs carry faint mineral stains left by centuries of slow water seepage. These streaks stretch gently down the rock in soft shades of rust, gold and pale white. They move so slowly that their growth cannot be seen, yet over decades they lengthen, quietly painting the canyon without disturbance. These subtle markings resemble natural calligraphy written with water instead of ink. At night, canyon air often becomes cooler along the floor while warmer air lingers near the upper walls. This creates slow rising and falling currents that circulate without turbulence. The exchange happens silently. Warm air drifts upward. Cool air settles downward. The entire canyon breathes in long, balanced motions that stabilize the environment for the life it shelters. Some canyon stones carry tiny fossilized imprints of great plants and creatures from distant geological ages. These delicate shapes remain pressed into the rock as timeless records of life that once passed gently through ancient landscapes. The canyon holds these fossils without urgency. They are not displayed loudly. They simply rest within the stone, proof that motion and rest have always existed together. In narrower canyons, the sky may appear only as a thin ribbon overhead, stretching quietly between towering walls. Clouds drift across this ribbon like slow-moving thoughts. The light within this narrow opening shifts softly from brightness to shadow. Watching such a confined piece of sky steadily change can feel even more calming than watching a wide horizon. It reminds the mind that even small windows can hold endless movement. Some canyon floors consist of compacted clay that darkens and hardens when wet, then softens again as it dries. During rain, this clay absorbs water slowly, preventing sudden floods and allowing moisture to sink deeper into the land. The earth responds not with haste, but with quiet receptiveness. The water is welcomed and stored gently beneath the surface. Canyons often guide animal movement into narrow, predictable paths. Deer, foxes, and smaller creatures follow these routes instinctively because the terrain offers safety and shelter. These paths become soft highways of life that carry slow footsteps night after night. The movement remains cautious and quiet, shaped by the same rhythms that carved the rock itself. As centuries flow onward, even the highest canyon towers gradually change their silhouettes. Sharp edges soften, peaks flatten, not through collapse but through continuous quiet erosion. Wind touches stone. Rain follows old paths. Heat and cold expand and contract the surface. Nothing dramatic happens in a single moment. The canyon ages the way a sleeping body does, through slow and gentle shifts that accumulate peacefully. Some canyons contain ancient floodplains now resting far above the present river. These wide stone shelves were once the gentle floors where water spread calmly during seasonal rises. Over thousands of years, the river slowly carved deeper into the land and left these peaceful resting places behind. Today they remain as soft platforms suspended in silence, holding soil, grasses, and sometimes small trees that grow without hurry. These elevated plains feel like forgotten pauses in the long conversation between water and earth, moments of stillness preserved high above the current flow. In deep canyon recesses where sunlight rarely enters, the air often carries a cool, mineral scent that never fully fades. The moisture in these shaded spaces lingers longer than on open land. Small beads of water cling quietly to stone. The temperature remains steady and calm without sharp changes. These hidden corners become natural sanctuaries of stillness, where the outside world feels distant and softened by shadow. Some canyon rivers carve spiraling shapes into the stone as they twist slowly around harder rock formations. These gentle spirals appear like quiet signature marks left by flowing water over immense periods of time. Each curve forms by patient repetition rather than force. The water does not rush its turning. It follows the land with acceptance, shaping beauty from endurance rather than speed. In wide canyon corridors, the echo of footsteps fades almost immediately, replaced by a thick, comforting hush. The sound enters the space and dissolves softly into the stone. This quick fading of noise gives the canyon its deep sense of privacy. Even movement feels wrapped in quiet. The body instinctively slows as it steps into such hush, guided by the land into gentler motion. Some canyon walls hold pockets of loose sand that shift softly when touched by wind. The movement is gentle and nearly silent. Small ripples appear and disappear across these sandy patches without leaving lasting marks. This constant yet subtle reshaping reminds us that even the quietest motion still shapes the world in tiny ways that accumulate across time. At certain moments before sunrise, canyon air becomes so still that temperature layers settle into place without disturbance. Cool air rests quietly along the floor while slightly warmer air hovers above. No wind stirs them. No sound disturbs their balance. This peaceful stacking of air feels like the canyon holding its breath before the day begins. Some canyon stones gradually change colour as sunlight passes across them throughout the day. Morning light brings pale warmth. Midday light reveals brighter mineral tones. Evening light deepens everything into amber and violet. These shifts happen slowly enough that the eye barely notices each transition. The canyon allows the day to unfold like a slow breathing cycle painted on stone. In narrow canyon waterways, sound becomes softened by the close walls and rounded surfaces. Even flowing water loses its sharpness. The current speaks in a low, continuous whisper rather than a rush. This gentle sound becomes part of the background of the land. It never demands attention. It simply remains as a steady presence that the mind gradually learns to rest within. Some canyon walls hide tiny cave shelters formed by small pockets of erosion. These natural recesses offer quiet protection from wind and rain. Animals rest there during storms. Birds perch briefly before continuing their journeys. These spaces feel like nature's pauses carved into stone, places where motion briefly stops and becomes still again. As shadows lengthen inside a canyon, details soften and edges blur gently. The land begins to take on a dreamlike quality as light fades from the lower walls first and lingers only along the upper rims. This gradual dimming happens without urgency. The canyon slips slowly into evening, teaching the mind that rest does not arrive suddenly. It arrives by degrees. Over extremely long spans of time, canyons slowly change their direction as rivers wander within their beds. The walls respond silently, widening here, narrowing there. The path adjusts without drama. The canyon becomes a living curve shaped by patience rather than decision. Its final form is never fixed. It is always quietly becoming. Some canyons hold stretches of river where the water seems to glide more than flow. In these places, the current slows almost to stillness as it spreads across smooth stone beds. The surface becomes mirror-like and reflects the towering walls above in quiet symmetry. Light drifts across the water in soft veils. Small ripples appear only when a leaf lands or a breeze brushes the surface. The water does not hurry forward. It seems content to simply exist in that moment of reflection before continuing its long journey. In certain canyon passages, layers of sediment rest so evenly that the stone appears striped with gentle colours. These stripes were once loose particles carried by ancient waters and laid down slowly in peaceful order. Over time, pressure turned them into solid rock without disturbance. Each band remains as a quiet record of slow change. When the sunlight drifts across these layers, the canyon seems to reveal its quiet timeline one soft shade at a time. Some canyon floors are shaped like shallow bowls, where rainwater quietly gathers during storms. Instead of rushing away immediately, the water rests briefly in these natural basins. It cools the stone. It softens the air. Tiny creatures drift in the surface tension before slowly disappearing as the water seeps back into the ground. These temporary pools feel like short pauses in the rhythm of rain, moments where the canyon holds water gently before letting it go. Deep within canyon walls, pressure from the land above continues to shape the stone in movements far too slow to see. Minerals shift, tiny fractures form and heal. The rock breathes with the slow pulse of the planet beneath it. These internal changes never announce themselves. They unfold in total silence, reminding us that transformation does not always make sound, and that even stillness can be active in hidden ways. In some canyons, very old driftwood lies lodged among stones, carried there by floods long past. These weathered pieces of wood rest quietly in dry air, bleached pale by sun and time. Their smooth surfaces hold the memory of distant journeys across water that no longer comes. They remain where they settled, becoming part of the canyon's stillness rather than remnants of motion. As twilight deepens, canyon insects begin to emerge in slow, quiet waves. Their movements feel deliberate and patient. Wings open gently. Tiny bodies shift from shadow to shadow. The soft hum that rises from their activity never grows loud. It simply layers itself into the nighttime silence like a steady blanket of sound. The darkness fills with life that moves without urgency. Some canyon walls display soft mineral dust that drifts down invisibly with the changing of seasons. This dust settles across ledges and stones in faint layers that are never thick enough to notice at once. Over years, it softens colours and rounds edges in ways too subtle for the eye to track. The canyon is quietly brushed by time itself, one invisible stroke at a time. In wide canyon valleys, moonlight often settles onto the stone in calm silver pools. The light does not spread evenly. It gathers along ridges and rests in fractured patches on the floor. Shadows stretch gently across the landscape without sharp edges. The entire canyon appears to glow faintly from within, as though it is breathing light rather than reflecting it. Some canyon rivers slow so much in certain regions that the water begins to separate into quiet channels woven through sand and stone. These braided streams move independently yet remain connected beneath the surface. Their combined motion feels gentle and layered. Even when one channel dries briefly, another continues its slow flow nearby. The water never leaves completely, it only rearranges itself. In deep quiet hours before dawn, canyon air becomes so still that even the faint movement of night creatures feels amplified in gentle ways. A single footstep may carry softly across long distances. A leaf-brushing stone may travel farther than expected, yet nothing feels harsh. The sound seems to float rather than strike. The canyon acts like a wide vessel holding every vibration with care. Over centuries, fine sand continues to collect in the lowest folds of the canyon. This sand accumulates so gradually that its rise is never noticed. Layer upon layer settles through seasons and storms until small dunes take shape without attention. These quiet formations mark the patient gathering of countless tiny movements into visible form. The canyon accepts each grain without resistance. Some canyons carry ancient patterns carved by water that no longer flows in visible ways. These dry channels twist and curve through stone like quiet signatures left behind by rivers that once whispered through these corridors. Wind now follows those same pathways, tracing the memory of water with soft breath. Even without visible movement, the shape of flow remains present in every curve, reminding the land how gently it once learned to move. In certain canyon chambers, sound becomes so absorbed by the surrounding rock that even the slightest noise dissolves almost immediately. A single pebble falling barely carries an echo. A quiet step seems to vanish into the stone before it finishes sounding. These spaces feel wrapped in deep hush, as if silence itself has found a home there. The mind responds naturally by lowering its own volume to match the land. Some canyon walls glow softly at sunrise as the first light touches the highest edges. The warmth descends slowly down the vertical faces of stone. The glow does not rush, It slides gently downward as the sun rises, warming ledge after ledge in patient sequence. The canyon awakens layer by layer rather than all at once. The light teaches the land how to rise calmly into the day. Deep within some canyon floors, layers of compacted clay hold moisture for long periods of time. Even after rains have ended and the surface appears dry, the earth beneath remains quietly damp. Roots reach into these hidden reservoirs. Insects find refuge in the softened ground. The canyon becomes a quiet keeper of water, storing it without display and releasing it only when life needs it. Some canyon walls shimmer faintly in the presence of early morning frost. As night temperatures dip, thin crystals form on shaded stone. These crystals catch the first light of dawn and glimmer briefly before melting back into invisibility. The transformation happens in silence. The frost arrives without announcement and leaves without trace. The moment exists only for those who rise early enough to witness it. In many canyons, the rhythm of seasons is expressed not through dramatic change but through subtle shifts in colour and texture. Stone darkens during wetter months and lightens again as dry air returns. Plants retreat into cracks during intense heat and re-emerge softly when the air cools. The land never rushes into its transitions. Everything moves with quiet awareness of the larger cycle. Some canyon walls carry delicate mineral veins that appear like faint threads woven into the stone. These veins formed when ancient fluids moved slowly through tiny fractures and deposited minerals along the way. Over immense time, the deposits hardened into gentle lines that decorate the rock from within. They feel like quiet reminders that even the smallest movements can leave lasting impressions when time is allowed to stretch wide. At night, distant stars often appear framed between tall canyon walls like quiet lanterns floating in narrow passages of sky. The stone creates a natural window upward where only a handful of stars may be visible at once. These limited views make each point of light feel more personal and intimate. The sky becomes smaller and softer, easier to hold in the quiet space of the mind. Some canyon floors absorb heat so slowly that they continue releasing warmth long after sunset. The ground radiates gentle heat upward into the cool night air. This subtle warmth creates soft thermal currents that rise without sound. Animals settle nearby to rest within these quiet pockets of warmth. The canyon offers comfort without the need for shelter, simply through the steady generosity of stored sunlight. In the stillest canyons, time itself seems to stretch thin. There is no urgency carried on the wind, no sudden movement in the stone. The land simply remains present. Minutes feel wider, thoughts slow their pacing without being asked. Breathing becomes deeper without effort. The canyon holds the body in a rhythm that belongs not to clocks but to the long patience of the earth. Over unimaginable spans of time, canyons continue their quiet work without interruption. Grain by grain, current by current, shadow by shadow, they become what they are through steadiness alone. Their beauty is never loud, their grandeur is never aggressive. They simply exist as proof that stillness and motion can share the same space, and that transformation can unfold without ever needing to be seen. Some canyons hold ancient stone steps formed naturally by uneven erosion, where softer rock wore away faster than the layers above it. These quiet, stair-like forms descend slowly into the depths, each step shaped over thousands of years by water that never hurried. When rain passes over these formations, it flows downward in gentle sheets rather than rushing streams, creating a soft, continuous motion that feels like the land breathing in slow pulses. These stone steps invite the eye to drift downward calmly, following a path shaped entirely by patience. In wide canyon basins, temperature layers settle at night like invisible blankets stacked gently in the air. Cool air sinks quietly to the floor while slightly warmer air rests above it without mixing. The two layers remain in peaceful balance for hours until sunrise slowly stirs them again. This natural layering creates a feeling of stillness so deep, it feels as though the canyon itself has fallen into sleep. Even sound seems hesitant to move across such settled air. Some canyon rivers carve channels so slowly that moss and algae grow alongside the water's edge without ever being disturbed. These soft green borders sway gently in the current but never tear away. Over time, they form living ribbons that soften the hard lines between rock and water. The contrast between moving water and anchored life creates a quiet harmony that feels both active and restful at the same time. In dry canyon stretches where water appears absent, moisture still travels invisibly through porous stone. This slow, hidden movement feeds plants that grow in places that seem impossible. Roots trace unseen paths through rock, guided by faint traces of dampness. Life follows water even when the surface reveals nothing. The canyon quietly supports what the eye cannot see. Some canyon winds move upward instead of across, riding warm stone faces in slow vertical currents. These rising breezes carry seeds gently from the floor to the upper ledges without scattering them violently. Plants take root in places that appear unreachable. The canyon quietly lifts life upward without force, guiding it into new spaces through soft air alone. In certain canyon areas, fine dust settles in such perfect layers that each season leaves behind a barely visible sheet of memory. Dry seasons leave pale surfaces, wetter seasons leave darker ones. Over long spans of time, these dust layers record silent patterns of the climate without ever making noise. The canyon becomes a quiet ledger where time writes without ink and without sound. Some canyon rivers contain sections where water flows beneath smooth stone roofs, created by overlapping rock shelves. Beneath these natural ceilings, sound fades almost completely. Water glides through in soft darkness. The stone above absorbs vibrations until even the movement of water becomes more felt than heard. These hidden corridors feel like the canyon's private passages where motion learns to become silent. At moments just after sunset, canyon walls release a faint stored warmth that rises into the cooling air as gentle thermal waves. These slow currents feel comforting rather than noticeable. Insects gather within them. Small animals pause inside them. The warmth drifts upward without resistance. The canyon gives back the energy it gathered during the day in the calmest way possible. Some canyon floors gently slope inward from all sides, guiding rainwater into central channels without sudden runoff. This slow convergence prevents floods and allows water to sink gradually into the ground. The land absorbs what it receives rather than resisting it. This soft receiving motion mirrors the way calm minds absorb experience without being overwhelmed. In narrow vertical canyons, light sometimes only appears as a thin, glowing line high above. As clouds pass, the brightness gently fades and returns without drama. The changing sky above feels distant and quiet. Even weather appears softened by the height and stillness of the stone. The canyon observes these changes without reaction. Some canyon paths exist only because countless animals followed the same gentle route over thousands of years. Each step loosened grain by grain of soil until a quiet trail formed. These paths were not planned. They were remembered into existence by repetition. Today they guide movement naturally without ever needing signs or markers. The land itself carries memory through motion. Some canyons carry faint magnetic signatures within their stone that subtly influence how tiny mineral particles settle over time. These invisible fields guide dust and sand into slow, graceful arrangements that appear almost intentional in their layering. Over decades, the particles rest into soft patterns that echo the quiet forces beneath the surface of the land. Though unseen by the eye, this silent guidance continues without interruption, shaping the smallest details of the canyon with patient precision. In certain canyons, early morning dew collects unevenly along the walls, depending on the texture of the rock. Smooth stone allows moisture to slide downward in thin threads. Rough stone captures tiny beads that rest quietly before evaporating. These different surfaces create a gentle rhythm of moisture movement that repeats each dawn. The canyon awakens not with sound, but with quiet, glistening and slow disappearance. Some canyon walls create natural wind chimes when narrow stone columns stand closely together and air passes between them. The sound is never sharp or loud. It remains a soft, hollow whisper shaped by moving air and stone distance. These tones appear only when conditions are exactly right and fade again without notice. The canyon plays music only when it chooses. In wide canyon valleys, sunlight sometimes reflects off layers of stone in such a way that faint secondary light appears beneath ledges and within shaded hollows. The light seems to rise from the rock itself rather than from above. This reflected glow gives the lower canyon a soft, indirect illumination that feels warm yet subdued. The land glows quietly from within. Some canyon streams follow paths that gently sway from side to side rather than run straight. This slow weaving movement allows the water to touch more stone as it passes, spreading its energy evenly instead of cutting deeply in one place. Over centuries, this gentle wandering creates broad, peaceful riverbeds shaped without hurry. The water moves as if it is thinking. In deep canyon shade, temperature changes happen so slowly that the body often cannot feel the difference between 1 hour and the next. The air shifts by fractions rather than waves. This gradual change allows creatures to remain in comfort without sudden adjustment. Even breathing seems to match the steadiness of the environment without being guided. Some canyon formations trap sound so efficiently that even distant thunder becomes a soft rolling murmur by the time it reaches the floor. The walls reshape and disperse vibrations into long, low echoes that feel more like background movement than disturbance. Storms lose their sharpness here. Power arrives as gentleness. In narrow canyon water channels, flowing currents sometimes create slow, circular pools where leaves and small objects drift endlessly without exiting. These quiet eddies become natural resting places for movement itself. Nothing rushes through them. Everything that enters stays a while. The water teaches pause through motion. Some canyon ridges contain stones so tightly packed that they barely shift even under heavy wind or rain. These stable formations act like anchors within the land. Everything around them may change, but these stones remain steady. Their stillness shapes the movement of their surroundings without moving at all. At rare moments during seasonal shifts, warm and cool air currents meet inside canyons in perfect balance. When this happens, the air becomes almost completely motionless for a brief time. Dust stops drifting, scents linger, even insects pause their flight. The canyon rests in a suspended breath that feels untouched by direction. Some canyon surfaces absorb sound so deeply that footsteps feel softer than walking on sand. The vibration enters the stone and vanishes rather than returning as echo. This gives movement a dreamlike quietness, as if the land itself is laying a gentle cover over every sound that touches it. Some canyons create natural sound tunnels, where even the softest noise is carried farther than expected along smooth stone corridors. A single drop of water can travel a surprising distance before fading. The sound never feels sharp. It stretches gently through the space like a long breath being released. This soft transportation of sound gives the canyon a sense of quiet awareness, as if it is always listening without ever speaking. In certain canyon regions, the stone absorbs heat during the day and releases it upward, rather than outward, as night arrives. This creates invisible streams of warmth that rise slowly into the cool air above. These upward currents feel comforting rather than noticeable. Birds sometimes rest on warm ledges long after sunset, guided only by this lingering memory of the sun stored in stone. Some canyon walls grow darker with age as minerals oxidize slowly over time. The color change happens so gradually that it never appears dramatic. It unfolds over decades and centuries like a watercolor softening into deeper tones. The canyon quietly repaints itself without sound. The land ages the way a resting body does, gently and without resistance. In wide canyon flats where rivers once spread freely, the soil often remains softer than surrounding rock for thousands of years. Even after water leaves, the land remembers how it once moved. Footsteps feel cushioned, plants grow more easily, the earth remains shaped by its long relationship with water, even when that water has drifted away. Some canyon corners remain in shadow for so long that their stones feel cool even in intense heat. These shaded pockets become natural resting zones for creatures seeking relief from the sun. The contrast between warmth and shade forms gentle temperature boundaries that can be felt but never shock the body. The canyon offers comfort simply through variation. In deep canyon curves where walls lean inward, rain sometimes falls without ever touching the floor directly. Water strikes the stone and slides downward in slow, shining curtains along the rock face. The rainfall becomes a moving surface rather than falling droplets. This transformation turns storms into quiet vertical rivers that whisper instead of crash. Some canyon rivers follow paths of least resistance so perfectly that their curves appear almost intentional, yet no planning guides them. Water simply accepts what the land gives and shapes itself around it. The result is graceful motion without design, beauty without intention. The river teaches that gentleness can still be precise. At certain times of year, canyon dust becomes so fine and dry that it lifts gently with the faintest movement of air. The dust does not form clouds, it floats in thin sheets that shimmer briefly in light before settling again. The land seems to breathe in slow particles rather than wind. Some canyon cliffs contain hidden hollows that warm gradually through the day and cool just as slowly at night. These natural temperature chambers create ideal resting places for animals that need steady warmth. The stone shelters them not by force but by consistency. The environment provides comfort by remaining predictable. In narrow slot canyons, light sometimes enters only as a thin, shimmering blade that moves slowly along the walls. The brightness does not illuminate everything at once. It reveals small sections of stone as it passes, guiding the eye in a slow, wandering path. The canyon teaches the mind to focus on one calm detail at a time. Some canyon landscapes take millions of years to shift only a few inches in silhouette. The horizon barely changes from generation to generation. Yet beneath that still exterior, constant movement continues in the form of pressure, temperature, and slow erosion. The canyon remains both stable and alive at the same time. Some canyons rest within regions where the ground beneath continues to rise or sink by tiny amounts over many lifetimes. These movements are far too slow to be felt, yet they quietly change how rivers move and where shadows fall. The canyon does not resist this motion. It adapts gently as the land beneath it slowly breathes upward or downward. The shape adjusts without stress or fracture, continuing its long transformation without ever appearing to change at all. In certain canyons, the stone holds warmth so evenly that temperature differences across the walls become almost imperceptible. Touching the rock in one place feels nearly the same as touching it several steps away. This balanced temperature creates a sense of uniform calm where the environment feels steady and predictable. The canyon becomes a place where the body never feels surprised by sudden heat or cold. Some canyon rivers move at such steady speeds that tiny ripples on the surface remain unchanged for long stretches of time. The pattern of the water seems frozen in motion. Leaves drift slowly along these repeating shapes, as if following invisible threads laden to the surface. Watching this movement feels less like watching flow and more like watching a quiet leap of time continuing without interruption. In deep canyon shade, certain stones remain permanently cool and slightly damp even through long dry seasons. The moisture trapped within the rock seeps outward so slowly that it never fully dries. These stones become silent sources of life for insects and plants that need only the faintest hint of water. The canyon nourishes without abundance, giving just enough to sustain what rests within it. Some canyon walls carry faint mineral perfumes that only appear after rain. As water touches the stone, subtle scents rise into the air, earthy and soft. The smell is never sharp. It spreads slowly and fades just as gently. The canyon releases its history through scent for brief moments before returning to silence. In wide canyon expanses where the land opens suddenly between steep walls, wind often softens into broad, slow waves of motion. The air no longer rushes, it drifts. These wide currents move through the canyon like a slow tide, lifting dust and leaves only slightly. The movement becomes part of the background rather than an interruption. Certain canyon cliffs slowly shed tiny grains of sand through temperature changes alone. As stone warms and cools, microscopic cracks expand and release particles without sound. These grains fall so lightly that they rarely bounce. They settle where they land and wait. Even gravity behaves gently in these places. Some canyon pools remain shaded so completely that sunlight reaches them only as dim reflection from nearby walls. The water appears dark yet clear. Surface movement becomes nearly invisible. The pool rests in a state of constant quiet where even reflection feels softened. These pools feel less like water and more like mirrors of stillness. In narrow canyon corridors, footsteps often produce soft, overlapping echoes that merge together into a continuous hush rather than distinct sounds. Each step blends with the one before it. The sound never stands alone. Movement dissolves into one fluid stream of quiet vibration that the canyon accepts without emphasis. Certain canyon formations rest directly above underground water channels that allow warmth to rise slowly through the stone. Even during cold nights, these surfaces feel gently warm to the touch. Animals often gather near these quiet warmth pathways without knowing why. The land provides comfort through unseen motion beneath the surface. Some canyon horizons change so slowly with erosion that no human lifetime can measure the difference. The edge of the land remains visually the same from generation to generation. Yet deep within the stone, movement continues, grain by grain. The canyon teaches that change does not need to be visible to be real. Some canyons experience a quiet daily cycle where cool night air sinks slowly into the lowest chambers just before dawn. This cool air settles like a soft blanket across the canyon floor and remains there for hours after sunrise. The warmer air above moves only slightly. The canyon holds this layered stillness without disturbance. Animals that rest near the ground wake inside this calm pocket of coolness, beginning their day without sudden temperature change. In certain canyon systems, rainwater travels along stone surfaces in thin, invisible films rather than visible streams. These films move so slowly that the water appears still even while it is in motion. Over long periods, this silent movement reshapes the stone without ever revealing itself. The canyon changes while appearing unchanged, guided by water that moves more like memory than force. Some canyon shadows remain fixed nearly all year due to the angle of surrounding cliffs. These permanent shadows create cool sanctuaries where moss and delicate plants grow without interruption. The environment inside these shaded pockets feels timeless. Light rarely disturbs them, temperature barely shifts. The canyon provides places where seasons pass without leaving strong traces. In wide canyon regions where ancient lakes once rested, the land still holds faint ripple-shaped ridges beneath layers of dry earth. These ridges were once waves. Now they remain as frozen motion beneath the soil. When wind moves across these subtle forms, dust settles into them and highlights their curves for brief moments before smoothing out again. Some canyon rivers glide so quietly in certain sections that even insects landing on the surface barely disturb the water. The surface tension seems to hold stillness in place. Reflections remain unbroken. The water appears unaware of gravity. These moments feel suspended between movement and rest. Certain canyon cliffs contain slow-moving internal water that never reaches the surface. This water shifts quietly inside microscopic channels etched through stone. Over centuries, it reshapes the rock from within without visible signs on the outside. The canyon evolves internally before it ever changes externally. In narrow, winding canyons, sound sometimes returns with a delayed echo that feels detached from its source. A soft sound may answer itself moments later from a distant curve. The echo is never sharp. It arrives softened and distant, as though the canyon is responding thoughtfully rather than immediately. Some canyon floors feel cool even under direct sunlight due to hidden moisture layers beneath the stone. The heat warms only the surface while deeper layers remain calm and cool. When bare feet or resting animals touch these surfaces, the heat and coolness blend together into a balanced comfort that never overwhelms the body. Certain canyon ledges warm and cool at different rates, creating soft air currents that rise from one surface and settle on another. These invisible exchanges of warmth occur silently all day and all night. The canyon continuously redistributes its stored energy without ever creating sudden wind. Some canyon formations appear to lean toward each other across narrow gaps. Over long spans of time, gravity slowly pulls these structures downward. They move so slowly that no visible shift appears within a lifetime. Yet the movement continues without stopping. The canyon reshapes itself through permanent patience. In the deepest canyon systems, darkness becomes layered rather than absolute. Faint reflected light drifts downward through multiple bends before finally fading. Each curve softens it further. Even darkness arrives gently here. Nothing enters suddenly. Everything becomes softened by the path it must travel. As our quiet journey through the world of canyons begins to fade into stillness, allow your breath to move slowly and without effort. We have travelled through corridors of stone shaped by water that never hurried and by wind that never forced its way forward. These vast spaces were not born from sudden motion, but from patience beyond counting. Every curve in the rock and every shadow along the wall carries the memory of time moving gently, moment by moment, grain by grain, without ever needing to be seen. Canyons remind us that transformation does not require pressure or urgency. They teach us that the most powerful changes often happen in silence. The river does not rush to become wide. The stone does not struggle to become smooth. Everything becomes what it is meant to be through steady presence alone. In that quiet way, the canyon mirrors the calm we seek within ourselves. It shows us that rest is not the absence of movement, but the soft rhythm beneath it. As you settle now into deeper relaxation, imagine the canyon resting beneath the stars, the walls holding the last warmth of the day, the river gliding quietly in darkness, the air layered in gentle stillness. Let your thoughts move as slowly as water through stone. Let the quiet widen around you until it feels safe and endless. You do not need to carry anything forward from this moment. You do not need to plan or think or listen closely. Simply allow warmth to drift through your body and let the mind soften into silence. Thank you for wandering through this quiet landscape with the sleepy scientist. If this gentle exploration brought you comfort, you're always welcome to return for more calm journeys through nature, science, and the hidden rhythms of the world. For now, let the canyon remain in your imagination as a place of deep rest and timeless calm. May your sleep be steady, your dreams peaceful, and your night as quiet as stone beneath a drifting sky. Good night.